I'm going to talk a little bit about the events that happened pre-1999 that led up to the formation of MMV. Bridget will then tell us how she saw what happened over the next 6 years when she sat in the chair as the chairperson of the MMV board. And then finally, I'll bring you up to date with some comments about what's been happening over the last 3 to 4 years. For most people, I guess, MMV actually started here in Geneva on the 3rd of November 1999, when Gro Harlem Brundtland, the then Director General of MMV, shook hands with Sir Richard Sykes, who was at that time the president of the IFPMA based here in Geneva. That's the trade organisation for the pharmaceutical industry. But in fact, you can track the origins of MMV at least 30 years before that. And that was the period of time from the 70s onwards, when the pharmaceutical industry was focusing its R&D skills very much towards the development of medicines for the developed world, and unfortunately at the expense of medicines for developing countries. There was a very famous paper published in 1999 in the International Journal of Infectious Diseases that had as its title a question: drug development output from 1975 to 96, what proportion for tropical diseases? And if you took the trouble to read the paper, you would have found the answer: 13 out of 1,223 newly registered products during that period of time, 1% related to diseases specifically of the developing world. Why was this? In a nutshell, in a single word, basically money. The upfront R&D costs of discovering and developing new products for anti-infective agents generally, and particularly for diseases of the developing world, far exceeded, in many cases, the net revenue that can be earned subsequent to a successful regulatory approval by selling those products. In contrast, R&D targeting non-communicable diseases such as hypertension and diabetes was yielding massive returns on net investment. So from the industry's point of view, it was no-brainer as to where to put their money. Why did this all come to a head around the late 1990s? As far as malaria is concerned, the answer is actually on this slide. The mainstay of controlling malaria in the developing world at that time rested on 4 products: treatment of uncomplicated disease, chloroquine and sulfadoxine pyrimethamine, affectionately known as SP, quinine and primaquine. And particularly in terms of treatment of uncomplicated disease, big problems on the horizon. Both chloroquine and SP were beginning to fail, and there were few, if any, obvious replacements that covered those indications. So, how to solve the problem? Well, around that time, it just so happened, as often happens in life, there were quite a number of people milling around here in Geneva who were worrying about those things. People from the control programs, people from the pharmaceutical industry, many, such as myself, who'd been involved in the industry doing work in this area and knew that the industry was no longer, in fact, engaged. So what to do about it? Well, I have to say, with somewhat apologies and temerity, I guess, at the time, we formed ourselves into what we called a strategic planning group. And we were people who worked in the public sector, who worked in the private charities, who'd worked in the pharmaceutical industry. At that time, relationships between the public sector, particularly WHO, and the industry, I have to say, were slightly frosty. So we did not meet in the WHO building, nor did we meet in the building of the IFPMA. We actually met in the business centre at the airport here in Geneva. The people involved, you can see here. I want to single out one only of them, Louis Cura, who's sitting in the audience today, because he had the unenviable task of keeping the rest of us in order and ensuring that our discussions and debates got focused on the ultimate end product. So Louis, thank you very, very much for that. A number of options in terms of how to proceed were discussed around that time.